Hi, everyone. Hi, welcome, welcome. My name is Beth Spotswood, and I am Alta's digital editor. I'm really excited to welcome you all to Alta Asks Live. This is the digital version of Alta Asks, the author interview series we do here at altaonline.com. Today, our interviewer, author, teacher, book critic, and Alta contributor, the wonderful Heather Scott Partington, returns to speak with author Kimi Eisele. Today, Kimi is here to discuss her novel, The Lightest Object in the Universe. We at Alta are already fans of this book. But if you haven't read it yet, please be sure to click the button. You should see a button right underneath our video right now. That'll take you to bookshop.org, where you can buy the book and support independent booksellers. If you're interested in Alta and unfamiliar with us, we are a quarterly magazine. Visit altaonline.com. You can become a member or check out a ton of our work. It's all there. Again, Heather and Kimi are going to speak for about 30 minutes. If you've got any questions, please, you can ask them in the comments. You can post a question below. You can ping us on Twitter. I will find a way to find your question. And we're going to circle back at the end of their interview and ask anything you guys want to know. So with that, Heather and Kimi, please take it away.
Thanks, Beth. Hi, Kimi. Welcome to Alta Asks Live.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
We're so pleased to have you here and to have a chance to talk about the lightest object in the universe. My brain always wants to say the lightest object in the world instead of the lightest object in the universe. But what a phenomenal book. It's interesting to have read something that's post-apocalyptic. I read it obviously just before the COVID-19 era. And even at the time that I read it, before we were living in something kind of post-apocalyptic and strange, it seemed so different to me from other novels of that genre. I kind of, when I picked it up, I thought, okay, here we go. And it was nothing like what I expected it to be, and in the very best way. It's a novel that gave me hope. It's a novel that demonstrates how people can work together and the power of love, which sounds really cliche, but it's not in a cliche way at all. And it was a wonderful journey narrative. And there were just so many things about it that were, as I said, hope-filled and joyful. And so I'm just really excited to talk about it today. So my first question is, how are you doing during the pandemic? And what has it been like to try to be creative during this time?
Thanks so much for those kind words. I am doing okay. My health is good. My family's health is good. I live in a great neighborhood. So I feel, I feel blessed in that way. And I'm also acutely aware of all the ways that this pandemic is hitting us in unequal ways. So in terms of my creativity, I've really been thinking about how best to speak to that, how best to speak to those inequities. And I'm waiting for answers, and I'm paying attention in the way that I usually do as an artist. I have had some trouble focusing, and I've had a really difficult time reading, especially somehow I'm able to write, and I've been writing a little bit about the current situations in various capacities, but I am having a difficult time reading. I've started maybe 6 or 7 books, and I just carry them around my house, and they're good books. They're not books that I would normally put down. So I'm having difficulty in that focus. I can't also sometimes finish movies. So there's a sense of like, maybe I don't want to come to endings. I don't know.
You have worked in multiple artistic genres. We're really, you're a unique author for us because you're not just an author, you're also a choreographer. You do visual art as well. You've been a director. Do you think that those different genres offer, you talked about observation, about paying attention to things. Do you think that those different media offer a different way to interpret the world or to look at the world? Do you feel like it's all kind of part of the same artistic process for you?
I think that all artists, writers, creative people, teachers, scientists, parents, I think, everybody employs the power of observation and paying attention. And, some of us maybe emphasize that as a practice more than others, or are like have built our muscles up to be doing that all the time. I find that, there have been I think that working in multiple genres is sometimes really helpful for me when I'm stuck on the page. I always feel like writing is the most primary genre that I work in, but it's definitely not the easiest. And so I feel like when I'm stuck, I can move to something else. I can go dance. I also find it the most painfully solitary. And I'm a very collaborative person. So I share my work a lot in draft stages. I know other writers who don't even share a draft at all before they send it off to an editor. And I'm not like that. Maybe a part of that is just the insecurities I have as an artist. Like, hey, what do you think? What do you think? But more than that, I think it's also that I really enjoy the process of co-creating and using, being influenced by other people's ideas and bouncing my own off of theirs. So at the same time, it can be a real drag. Like, it's wonderful, but it can also be a real drag to sometimes feel like I have too many interests that pull me in different directions. Like, I really am wanting to be spending time on a new novel, and I have found myself in the last week or two doing watercolors, which has been great in some ways. But I'm not primarily a watercolorist, so there's a learning curve with that, and it's fun and helpful to work in a different genre, but sometimes it pulls me away. And, so it's balancing like the focus and curiosity and attention and how to streamline or not, how to let it be messy.
Yeah. You, in one of our written interviews, you talked about improvisation, which is a dance technique. It's a technique in many arts, but in dance specifically, you talked about how that relates to your writing. Can you just explain a little bit about the connection between the words that you write and the body? You talked about words coming out of movement and things like that.
Yeah, I think it took me a long time to understand that writing was connected to the other practices of dance art and movement. And, as I get older, I realize that they are connected for me, and that one can very much feed the other. And I often do write about physicality. I think in this book, there's definitely a sense of Carson's, one of the protagonists, his physicality and his journey. And then Beatrix, the other protagonist, is also very much in motion. So I think I noticed that came in to the work. I think also just in terms of this particular improvisational practice that I've done for many years, it's about composing with other dancers and musicians and sometimes poets in ensemble form. And it gives a lot of permission for the laboratory space. So the only way that you come to understand how your choices have impact is by trying them out. And I think for many, many years in writing, I was a little precious about doing something on the page, and that I felt like I think this is part of any writer's journey, but to approach the page like a laboratory was really helpful, for me to be less afraid of trying new things, especially in fiction and also in just in crafting a story. So how will I know if this works? Well, I'll only know if it works if I try it. So it's given me that kind of permission, which I appreciate.
So this is a story about two people who are in love, who are trying to find each other after there's been this cataclysmic event that separates them and that changes life as they know it. Where did the genesis of that idea come from? What was the little seed or the nugget that began this story for you?
There were multiple seeds, as with any forest, I think. I think that I was thinking a lot about peak oil at that time. So that was the conversation that was happening when I started the book. I was also thinking very much in my head about the possibility of collapse. And I think part of that came from this acknowledgement of the superpower and sort of the not so superness of the power, and the vulnerability of that power, and also the exploitative nature of that power. So, I did wonder what would happen if this country in particular lost its power, and what that would mean very literally and also figuratively. And I wanted to experiment with that sense, with that loss of entitlement and that loss of power, and what that might look like. So I let fictional characters do that. And then really the idea of a love story, thinking about at that point, I started writing it a long time ago, but we were becoming more and more addicted to our technology. So thinking about, if we didn't have that, how might we maintain connection across miles? And, as we're seeing now, it's pretty critical in, for many of us. So for our survival. But if we didn't even have this, where would we find, how would we keep going? Where would we turn, to that kind of sustenance?
What has the reaction been like, as our world has changed? Have you heard from people who read the novel before or who are reading it right now?
Yes, I just did a book club, a local book club with Literacy Connects, which is a nonprofit geared towards literacy. I've been in a couple other Zoom book clubs with people. So it's been really interesting to hear from readers right now, some of whom said, when they first started reading it during this moment, that they were worried that it was going to be a little bit too close to the bone, but that as they continued with the story, they felt really grateful to have this sense of optimism, and also like some of these tools, for how we might reach, to how we might connect. So this is just my favorite story right now, and I'll tell it, is that a neighbor who I don't know well, she reached out very shortly after, in mid-March, she reached out and asked to go for a walk, a safe distance walk. And she was reading the book, and she said, I'm reading it, and can we do what Beatrix does? Can we gather the assets in the neighborhood? And so we're doing that now. We've done up a survey, and we're about to send it out, and trying to figure out how to introduce it to people. And, we're having to do that electronically, and acknowledging that not everybody's connected to the internet here. So, but it was really it was very moving to be asked that. And then okay, well, what does Beatrix ask? What do we want to know? So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm a high school teacher, and when I would teach AP English for a long time, I always had students say, why is every story we read depressing? And we had a lot of conversations about how conflict comes out of the hard things that happen in life. How did you maintain, because you absolutely did it, how did you maintain this sense of hopefulness and positivity without venturing into the cliche, and also by keeping conflict there? By keeping, we want to keep turning the pages. We want to find out what's going to happen, but there's definitely, there's an optimistic view of humanity that's carried throughout, I would say. So was that something that came naturally to you, or is that something that you definitely had to think about as you were writing?
It kind of came naturally to me. I feel that I really did not want to write another gloom and doom post-apocalyptic work. We have plenty of them. And I also really felt like my like my power of observation, what I saw in adverse situations, not always my own, but sometimes my own, was that we also have this incredible capacity to reach for other people, which is like what we're doing right now, even though we can't touch. And so I knew that it didn't always have to be about cruelty and violence. And I just feel that really deeply. And I've had lots of conversations about people who disagree with that. And, that's not to say that that scarcity sometimes scarcity breeds the opposite of that. So it's not that I'm negating that, but I do feel like we've been overpowered with the story of violence. And I don't know if people saw, this week that the Guardian ran a piece about like the real story of the Lord of the Flies, William Golding's novel, and then this writer, found sort of an alternate version of that, where the boys, a group of boys who were, got shipwrecked, so to speak, they helped each other out and survived. And so I really like everybody's sending me that piece. And I'm like, I know I've read it, but it really illustrates that, sometimes like the stories that get told, maybe because we know that conflict, pulls us forward, those stories are the ones that get told. And then sometimes these other stories get lost, even though if we look around, we can find evidence of, people helping each other out all the time. So I think I learned a lot from watching folks in my neighborhood, not the neighborhood I'm in now, but other neighborhoods I've lived in, be kind and helpful.
How do you think that what's happening right now is going to change literature for the future?
That's a great question. Well, I feel like, what I'm seeing from writers is that, I do think that these fissures that have always been here and that writers have always been writing about, I think that we'll keep writing about them. I think we'll keep making space for the untold stories and the stories of disenfranchisement, which are just all around us all the time, whether we're living them or not. So I don't think that that's necessarily a change in literature, though I do wonder if we will also find ways to balance the terror and the violence with the beauty and the friendship. I mean, without sounding too cheesy, but I mean, like, when I look at this moment, it's like every day I personally fluctuate between like horror and terror and despair and worry and anxiety. And then I also, find moments of levity and beauty and connection. And so like life is like that all the time. I think it's the nature of being alive, and it's, where we learn to put our attention, which stories we're gonna prioritize. So I don't think that there's only one story to ever tell. And I do hope that in like the complexity of the narration of this moment includes both of those things.
Mm-hmm. Great. What are you working on now?
I'm working on a new novel that takes place partially in the Sonoran Desert and partially in Southeast Alaska. And there's some similar themes to this book that I'm exploring. There's a grandmother and granddaughter have emerged, and maybe some potential environmental disaster as well. But very different setting and not quite so post-apocalyptic.
Great. Do you have something from The Lightest Object in the Universe that you would like to read for us?
Yeah, I have a little section picked out that's pretty short. And this is in the first, here's the book. I don't know if it comes out backwards for you all, but this is in the first of 3 sections of the book. And it's Carson, who is high school principal who's left the city and he's walking west toward love, really. This is pretty early in his journey. At dusk, Carson stopped walking and dropped his pack. And I will say that he's walking along the railroad line. The night was clear and cold, and already the first stars had appeared. He stood in a clearing, the damp grass and weeds up to his ankles. Exhausted, his body chilled quickly in the stillness. From a nearby stand of pine, he gathered needles, twigs, and thick branches. He set a match to the kindling, and the sparks made tiny, mesmerizing fireworks. He added more wood and warmed his hands. He felt like the last man on earth. His shoulders ached, and a blister had formed on the bottom of his heel. He'd made it through his first day. No ambush, no weapons, no compound fracture, no fall from a cliff, no dangling by a hand. Lucky. He listened to the hiss of flame and the silence beyond it. The problem with fire was that it made the darkness darker. If anyone else was out there, they could see him, but he was blind beyond the fire line. A part of him wished someone friendly would emerge from the darkness, someone in the know, with smart words to offer. He opened a can of beans and ate them cold. Soon he'd be foraging, mice and squirrels, berries and weeds, dumpsters. You know things, he used to tell his students. Use what you know. The resources are inside of you. Where were his students now? Had they fled the city too? Were they holed up in the suburbs? Did they know enough? He felt a twinge of guilt. He'd given them books to read. He'd made them think about cause and effect, how one event leads to another, how the course of history could be swayed by a single person or a collective theory. He'd honed their critical thinking skills. He'd made them explain themselves, articulate their ideas. They had learned about the rise and fall of so many other civilizations: Sumer, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Chaco Canyon, Tikal, Greece, Rome, Spain, Germany, but not their own. How could he have prepared them for this? He scraped the last of the beans from the can and wished for more salt. The morning brought dampness and more aches. Carson did not want to move. He opened his eyes as a large crow flew overhead. The birds were so fortunate. They could see the sprawl and order of cities. They could take in a long stand of coastline, the blur of white waves crashing. They could drift over the green gold quilt of farmland. If only he could have that view of the landscape, a more coherent geography, to see clearly where he was going, where he had been. A crow landed a few feet away, its blue-black feathers shiny like metal. Behind the house where he and June had lived, he used to watch the crows as they flocked to the fields to scavenge for seeds and insects. They'd gather there, a jittery oil slick. A shadow passed and another crow arrived. The two birds stood in the grass pecking, moving with purposeful and sturdy hops. Watching them, Carson had a momentary sense that nothing of any significance had taken place. The world was exactly as it always had been. Earth circled the sun, bringing darkness and light to its surface. Crows searched for breakfasts in open fields, devouring grain and insects in the natural order of the food chain. A man could wake up at dawn after sleeping in a field and be covered with dew, as always. He thought again of John Muir, how he returned home from his wanderings to a wife and child. Carson wanted to go home to that. He wanted to roll over and put his arm around Beatrix. April 4. B. I am like a crow looking for the shortest route. I survived day one. I am green and damp. Even my bones have emotions. I hope I have not made a mistake. Love, Carson.
Thank you. Thank you for this entire novel. I just loved it so much. Can you tell people where they can find you online, your various social media or website or whatever you have?
Yeah, so you can find me at my own website, kimieisele.com. My Twitter handle is the same. My Instagram handle is the same. My name is spelled Kimiesele. It's right up at the top of the screen. So that's where you can find me. I hope that you gain something from today's conversation.
Thank you so much. We're going to have Beth come back and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Awesome.
Hi.
Hi.
Am I back? Did I appear? Okay. Magic. Magic. The first question I just want to reiterate for anyone watching who doesn't want to, we have some people who are in the middle of the book and are worried that there might be spoilers. Yes, this conversation will absolutely be uploaded to altaonline.com later this afternoon. It takes me a bit to work out the deets, but it will be up there in its entirety. One question for you, Kimi, and I'm not sure if you touched upon it a little bit earlier. So many apocalypse novels are dark and cold. Do you think the fact that you're a female writer infused hope in your work at all?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think, if I'm going to overgeneralize, I think that, oftentimes we ask different questions of the world. Not always, but I had a lot of male readers early on. Like I said, I shared the book often, and male readers were very obsessed with like what happened. I mean, again, I'm generalizing by gender here. They really wanted to know like what happened, what systems went wrong. And they also wanted to know like, well, what's he eating and how far is he walking? And, where is he finding his food? And, like they were very curious about those. And like, where is he on the map? And women, some female readers were also had those questions, but maybe less obsessed with those. So yeah, I don't know. I do remember early on, my agent sent me, there was a piece in the Times about women writing the apocalypse, and there was a line in that story about menstruation. And I took it to heart, and I really wanted, like, what would you do in the apocalypse? And I really wanted that. I really wanted to include that. And so there's a teenage girl in the book, and so she does contend with her monthly cycle, and that's part of her story. So I don't know that most male writers would include that detail.
I don't know that they would either.
But
all right. A radio station plays a key role in your book. What's your connection to the medium of radio?
I love radio so much. I've done some radio production when I spent some time in Alaska and did some radio production there, and I've done some in Tucson, and I really love, I think I'm an audio learner. I do tend to remember things more when I hear them. So I really wanted to think about, if we weren't sitting around watching TV or movies, what kind of mediums might pull us together, and radio felt like a natural one for that. And also because it can happen with such low power. So I learned a lot about low power radio, which was a grand education. And then just a tiny little story while there's time. Another coincidence that happened here in town is that a lot of the book takes place on Halcyon Road, and that is actually a road in Tucson where I used to spend some time. And I met a woman recently who said that she had two friends who moved to Halcyon Road, and they actually bought the house where this person that I knew used to live. It was his old house, and so one of the people that live in that house is a DJ for a local low power radio station called Downtown Tucson Radio. And because of the pandemic, he has moved his broadcasting home to Halcyon Road. So he is doing low power radio on Halcyon Road, which is just a great coincidence, because that's something that happens in the book, Halcyon Radio.
Here, I just found a link to Downtown Radio. Here you go, folks.
Yeah.
All right, last question for you, Kimi. Characters in the book seem to choose either to stay in the city and stay in the city and rebuild community, or flee to the country and form a new community. Which one would you choose?
Well, I think part of this idea of gathering assets in my neighborhood is to think about how, you know, what we have here that will serve us in the here and now. You know, Tucson is kind of a different situation because of water and rain. Although I know people who live off rainwater, who fulfill their needs with water from the sky. So it is possible. So I like to think that I would be someone who would stay and build in my community, you know, a la Beatrix. Like, what are the assets here? What can we build? What's our story? How can we help each other? That's, you know, that would be my vision.
Well, you're already on your way by identifying the assets in your neighborhood on your walks your socially distant walks.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Thank you, Heather, and especially a big thank you to author Kimi Eisele. Again, we are big fans of The Lightest Object in the Universe. Buy the book if you're interested in checking it out from an independent bookseller. Button right below us. There it is. It's a really cool cover. And join us next week, Wednesday, May 20th, same time, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, for author Peter Orner. Again, Kimi, thank you. Heather, thank you. And everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thank you.